is Adarsh Sehgal, and I am the head of events and activities here at Hyderabad chapter of ADI. So today, for the third in the series of talks of FutureScapes, we have for you Nachiket. So before I introduce Nachiket, I'll just like to talk to you a little bit about ADI. ADI is Association of Designers of India, and we are committed to create the best in design practices in our profession in India. If you want to know more about ADI, you can log on to adi.org.in. There are a lot of memberships that are available, which we implore you to check out. You could also follow us on Instagram, where we do a lot of where we post most of our events that are happening. Without further ado, I would like to introduce our guest today. So we have a very special guest today. Nachiket is the co-founder of the award-winning medtech startup called Creo Labs. They specialize in the field of emergency and critical care, and they have also sort of developed a very novel breathing device called SANS, and which is basically focusing on newborn breathing support, but which has been adapted to adult care, and it's been helping fighting the COVID scene. Um, Currently, Nachiket is joining us from Toronto, Canada, and he's been working for Grand Challenges Canada as an investment manager, and he's been shaping the organization humanitarian portfolio, and sort of finding innovative problems to very difficult problems. So, without further ado, Nachiket, I invite you to sort of share your screen and take over.
Thank you so much. Hello and good evening to everybody. Let me just
Yeah, I'll
share my
just stop
screen.
my share. Yep, please go ahead.
Sure. Yeah, is everybody able to see my screen perfectly?
Yes, yes.
Great. So good evening to everybody. I'm Nachiket. I'm the co-founder of Koyo Labs, as was already I was introduced. So thank you so much for that. The topic today that I want to really discuss with you all and to have a conversation and a dialogue is around interdependency. So, what is the future of design and how it is more about interdependency and in acknowledging intersectionality? So, what exactly is intersectionality? It is basically that everything is connected, but certain people in a group in a society have privilege or power or are discriminated because of their gender, their race, the color, socioeconomic status, and a lot many other factors. And that basically is intersectionality, which is basically the overlapping of all these systems together, which creates the person or the persona or a group of people who we want to design systems for. So it's basically saying that every individual is different, and they are made up because of their upbringing and because of their environment around them and the behavior in which they are brought up, their gender, their color, their nationality, their language, their education, and many more such things. So to start with, if I have to give my LinkedIn profile, I would say I'm Nachiket. I'm an engineer, designer, entrepreneur, an award-winning designer, co-founder of Koyo Labs, now an investment manager with humanitarian grand challenges. But in the perspective of intersectionality, the way I would describe myself is this. So I'm an Indian, I'm a Maharashtrian, I'm a heterogeneous male, I'm a Hindu Brahmin. I come from a cosmopolitan city. I have an upper middle class background, also a defense background. I've been educated in a premier institute. So if you summarize my upbringing or the intersectionality here, I would say I have a substantial privilege being raised in India and the way I was raised. Also, now that I am in Canada, I belong to a visible minority. So this is basically how I would describe myself in the context of intersectionality. And let me start with how intersectionality plays a key role in designing of systems, and in the future, how it is going to really be instrumental in designing a better future. So I have come to this conclusion because of my experiences. And let me start that with my story of Koyo Labs. So before I start what Koyo Labs, I would want to give a brief intro of what Koyo Labs is. So Koyo Labs, as was described earlier, is a medical device firm which we started back in 2014, and which basically specializes in emergency and critical care, and we make innovative products for this domain. So three of the products that we have developed till now are as in the slides provided. So the first one that we developed was called SaaS. SaaS is a neonatal breathing support device, which basically gives breathing support to babies who are in distress. So babies who are not able to breathe properly because their lungs are not properly developed. So SaaS, right now, there are 100 devices which are already installed in various hospitals in India, and more than 1,000 babies have benefited because of the use of SaaS. The second device, which very interestingly happened because of COVID-19, or I would say in response to COVID-19, was a different version of SaaS. We called it SaaS Pro. And that is basically for the adult population to again take care of respiratory distress because of COVID-19. So we kind of pivoted because of COVID-19 and said, what can we do so that we can even help during COVID-19? And we quickly did a turnaround of our design and the development, and came up with a new variant of it. 300 of these devices are already functional in different COVID ICUs across India, and more than 3,000 patients have benefited with the use of this device till date. Uh, the other device, I don't know why the image is not there. Okay, there it is. Is called WAPCare. WAPCare is a device to reduce the incidence of a condition called ventilator-associated pneumonia. So this is a hospital-acquired infection. Very interestingly, and not many people know that hospitals and especially ICUs are a hotbed for new infections. So people who go to the ICUs to get treatment for a primary ailment may get an additional infection when they are in the ICU. And these are called hospital-acquired infections. One of such infection is ventilator-associated pneumonia, which happens in patients who are on the ventilator. And what happens is basically the secretions, oral secretions which are generated, so saliva, mucus, all these go inside the lungs and cause pneumonia in the lungs, and that is called ventilator associated pneumonia. So our device basically intelligently senses these secretions in the lungs and removes them from the airway before they can reach the lungs. And we have 20 installations of this device, and it has saved more than 100 patients till date. So this is briefly what we have achieved from 2014 till now, and this is what Koyo Labs has been working on till date. And I would say I'm open to any questions. So keep the questions coming in as they are. So like you don't have to wait for any time for any questions to come in. So I'm open to that. So let me start with how we kind of started Koyo Labs. I so I don't have a background in medicine, as all of you guys know already. I'm an engineer and an industrial designer. And so during my diploma project or the thesis project in NID, I was doing an internship at a company called Inaxel, who are also Koyo Labs investors. And in fact, now we have merged with Inaxel. So during that initial phase, me and my co-founder, along with four other people, did a clinical immersion in a tertiary care hospital in Bangalore. And it was for 2 months where we shadowed doctors, patients, nurses, the entire clinical path, did interviews with people, with patients, did a lot of desk research to find out the incidence rates, what are the negative outcomes, how does, the progress of a disease happen, what is the final outcome, whether patient survived, didn't survive, what was the mortality, what was the morbidity. So many of these things were evaluated, and then we kind of came down to about 120 different observations, which we called negative observations, wherein something negative happened. uh, and so to counter these, then we started filtering out, because we obviously could not solve 120 different needs. We came up with the top 60 needs and then to the top 10, and of which we've selected two, and those are the two devices that you saw in the previous slides. So this is how we kind of took, this is the approach that we took to start developing devices. But during this clinical immersion, what we realized was that these problems were not just health related problems, and these were very, you know complex, wicked problems, and they were having very complex nature, mostly socio-cultural or socio-economic public health problems. uh, a lot of things were dependent on how the patient came in, what was the culture of the patient, what language they spoke, what was their economic status, what was their education, what was their awareness. And many of the outcomes, or the complications, were a part were because of this background. And that is where we I kind of I come from that background of saying why intersectionality plays a crucial role. And so all of these things are intertwined. So if we say that we want to solve a healthcare problem, it is not a healthcare problem in isolation. You cannot just say that I'm going to solve pneumonia. We need to know why that pneumonia is happening. It is happening in which patients, what are the settings, where are the patients coming from, and many such things. So that is very important. And many of the insights or many of the observations that we came across were at the periphery or at the outside, very random to say. Like, one of the examples, if I can give you, is that diabetic foot amputations. So basically, patients who are diabetic, and the diabetes has reached to a level where it has caused gangrene in the foot, and the foot needs to be amputated. There are a lot of cases like this in India, and we kind of saw a lot of these cases. But the interesting fact was that these were seasonal, and we just couldn't understand why during a certain season would you have more cases of diabetic foot amputations, or people with having aggravated diabetes leading to foot amputations. So we kind of dug deeper, and we found out that this was the temple of festivals, and this was the season of festivals, and this was the season where people used to go to, especially old people, used to go to temples, and they used to go barefoot. So people who have diabetes, they basically lose sensation in their peripheries, so in their arms and in their legs, they lose sensation. And when these people used to go to temples, they had to obviously take out their footwear and then go, and then they did not really understand that there were what was happening with their foot, whether they were getting any injuries, they were getting any cuts, any abrasions. And it kind of they kept on going ahead with their life without realizing that there were abrasions, and then that caused gangrene. and then it led to further complications, and then finally foot amputations. Now if you see this in the entirety, now it makes sense. But if you just take it out and say, you know, the foot amputations is seasonal, it doesn't really make sense. And that is where I kind of come and say that intersectionality and the culture and the education and the awareness and all these other things, you know, the race, language, even gender, all these play a very crucial role in any solution, or even in identifying a problem and then to devise a proper solution. One such similar case that came across, which was the genesis of SARS, was a premature baby being brought to the hospital in an auto rickshaw. Now the question is, why is a baby coming in an auto rickshaw? Where is the ambulance? And the baby's parents were giving respiration. So the bag and mask respiration, the ambu bag, which is basically a small silicon bag which they can put on the baby's face and pump air. This was being provided by the baby's parents while the baby was being transferred in a auto rickshaw to the hospital. Now, this really shocked us because we didn't really understand where the ambulance, why is the baby, you know, being transferred? Why can't it happen, you know, at the setting? So the baby was being transferred from one hospital to the other, and then we realized why is the baby not getting the right treatment in the first hospital in the first place. So that kind of triggered a lot of thought, and that kind of led to the, you know, understanding that these problems are not just clinical. These problems have deeper roots. These problems are intertwined in the culture that we live, the society that we live, the economic status of the parent, and many such things. So the understanding and the final conclusion was that the patients, the baby's parents were not able to afford the treatment in the first hospital, and that is the reason they were bringing it to the next hospital. Secondly, the and the private hospital, the first hospital to which they had taken, were, the baby was taken, was also a secondary referral. The baby was being actually transferred from a rural setting. Now in the rural setting, there was, though devices were available, there were no trained personnel to actually man these devices and to use them effectively, and so the baby was being referred. So this was the complexity of the problem. uh, to which, you know, one more thing that we realized was 70% of the devices which are used right now in India are imported, and they don't really, you know, target the Indian culture. They are not meant for the Indian masses or the Indian healthcare settings. They are mostly dependent on electricity and dependent on many other peripherals, which may not be available in India in many of the settings, especially in the rural settings. And that is when, you know, it kind of came up and we kind of made SaaS. So SaaS is the first multi-powered uh, CPAP, so continuous positive airway pressure device. That is the terminology used in the medical terms to provide breathing support. It has an inbuilt battery and a compressor, which works for 2 hours. It also has a manual mode. So in case of a power failure, it can work, you know, without any electricity, even without the battery, but just by manually pumping the system. The skill requirement for this device is minimal, and we kind of made it so that even the ASHA workers or the BHC attendants could use it. It has a handle on top and it's just 4 kg, so it is light and can be, you know, transported in most modes of travel in India. It has ports to connect to oxygen and to set the flow and the pressure. It also has a provision to connect to a humidifier. So it's basically the air which comes in and goes inside the lungs needs to have certain amount of humidity so that it's good for the babies and for the lungs. So there is an additional feature that a humidifier can be connected if required. So these are the features which basically make this device almost agnostic on the environment, and it is a self-sustained device. Now, the reason why this device was never developed in the Western world was because it was never required there. And the reason why we didn't have such device was because 70% of the devices are imported. Nobody really looked at what was really the need. The other thing was people who looked at the need were looking again just at respiratory distress as a clinical terminology and not looking at the background of why this is happening. So once we dig deeper and found out that these are the reasons, the device that we made now is being used in most peripheral hospitals, in the PHCs and rural hospitals where it is being very effective. And we have testimonials from doctors who say that the referral rates from their hospitals to tertiary hospitals and neonatal ICUs has really reduced, and patients' lives are being saved in the smaller hospitals itself. So this is what I kind of wanted to bring out, was that the clinical problems are intertwined in the cultural problems and the socioeconomic problems, and it's like an entire big mess. It just needs to be unwinded properly, and only then would you be able to find out what the real problem is, and then to design the right solution for the same. So to see in the future, this is going to be even more relevant. We would have to acknowledge intersectionality in whatever we design and whatever design research that we conduct. So we need to identify the age, disability, religion, race, sex, gender, sexual orientation, income, culture. All these things need to be really identified before for a target market before we can actually come down to a solution, and only then can the solution be really effective. To be honest, there is no one size fits all solution now. I mean, and I'm not just talking from the public health perspective. Even in consumer devices, even in other goods, everybody wants individualized products, and that can only happen once you understand the concept of intersectionality, and you kind of empathize at a deeper level uh, on what an individual is, what are the cultural context in which the individual was brought up, and what are the environments, what are the surroundings, what are the culture, what is the society around that individual or that group of individuals, and only then can the right product be built. The other thing that I would want to kind of highlight here is the interdependent or collaborative approach of design, which is going to really increase in the years to come. So when I started Goyo Labs, I was an industrial designer 100%. As I kind of went through my journey, I realized there are other disciplines which are equally important for a product to be successful. It has to have a good business plan. It has to have good research. It has to have good finance. It has to have good engineering. It has to have good marketing. So all these other disciplines also play an equal role in in any product as much as design does. And there's always an interplay and overlap of design with all these other roles, and that is going to increase in the future because if the world is shrinking, people are coming together, and it is becoming one big connected world. And in such a world, it is far more important to have a collaborative approach to design. Designers being aware of the other fields uh, around them, especially the fields of business and finance, because at the end of the day, products have to sell in the market, and at the end of the day, and that is governed by the business. I mean, it needs design definitely plays a very big role, but at the same time, designers also need to be very aware of all the other factors which play also an equally important role in the success of a product. So these are the two, I guess, key takeaways of my entire journey for the 5 years. And to conclude, happiness is when you see results. So this is one video that we got from one of the doctors in a rural hospital in Punjab. Let me just play it. So this is, the final outcome, which actually brings the joy, and it just makes, the entire journey, the 5 years spent on a product, fruitful. It just gives you that satisfaction, which, selling a product or money can never bring. This is an entirely different level of satisfaction that you get in developing products which actually save lives, or which change lives, or create a big change uh, for the people. Sorry. Yeah, and I guess that's the end of my slides, and I'm open for any questions that you guys would have.
Thank you so much, Nachiket, for that inspiring talk. Uh, so I had a few questions. One question you mentioned, like business and finance, sort of knowledge of that being a very critical factor. Were there any sort of unique business models that you guys had to come up with for to make it affordable to these rural hospitals that you were catering to?
Oh yes. So the typical business model that most of the device industries use is called the razor blade model, wherein the device is subsidized, and they charge for the consumables. So this is one model that we used. The other model was basically to ensure that even in the design stage, we always knew what was the target market, and we always knew what was the target price point. So always keeping in touch with the key opinion leaders, knowing what is their buying capacity, and then designing the product accordingly was something that we started right from the day one, and that ensured that our product always remained in the same budget, and that ensured that people were able to buy it.
Got it. Another important sort of, I think, question arises when you're sort of designing medical products is certification. Like
Yes.
I know a lot of people. Like I'm a product designer myself, and I have friends who want to do medical design and create an impact, and they always sort of stumble upon this certification and are really like scared. So, what's your advice on that front, and what sort of certification did you have to go through?
Yes, so certification definitely plays a big part in medical device design, and more so because these are life-saving devices. You should not create, if you're not able to create any good, you should definitely not create any harm. So that is the primary principle behind regulation. So we had to go through the entire ISO 13485, that is the standards for medical device manufacturing. We had to go through that compliance. We also went through the C certification and the FDA compliance. It's a long process. All the manufacturing components need to be certified. They need to be of the medical grade. They need to be tested. There are lots of tests on the electrical safety, on the sterilization, on usability, on electronics, on software. So all these tests need to be complied with. I would say yes, keep that buffer time. I mean, it took 5 years for this reason. It so it just takes time, and you have to be aware of that, and you need to budget that. So I would say when you are taking that step forward to say that yes, I want to start a medical device company, keep that period in mind, that it would take you 4 to 5 years. And of course, it is dependent on the class of device. So most of the regulatory bodies have different classification systems. Like C has a system, FDA has a system, based on what class of device you are in, and that is basically based on the risk level of the device. The amount of certification varies. But no matter what, it would typically take between 2 to 4 years to develop a device.
That's quite a while.
Yes.
Got that. So we have a question from the audience. Anand asks, "What is your take on the recent ventilator shortage in India, and our response to it, specifically on the efforts of quickly building affordable local alternatives?"
Yeah, so again, to be honest, I am not really for quickly building local alternatives. So as I mentioned before, if you cannot save lives, please ensure that you don't cause additional harm. That is the fundamental primary humanitarian principle that anybody needs to follow by and abide by. So and I support localization definitely. I would definitely want everything to be localized. In fact, that is the reason that we created Koyo Labs, was to have local solution which really target the local audience. But at the same time, you also need to understand that it takes time, and it cannot be overnight that you just create a problem, get a few components from electronic markets and just combine them together and create something and just deploy that. No, it needs to have that rigorous amount of testing, rigorous amount of verification, validation before it can go on a patient.
We have another question. Did you ever have to reevaluate the need for the product in the middle of in the middle of development, since the product development sort of spans multiple years, like it takes a long time to.
Yes, we did have those moments of doubt, of self doubt, of saying what is really happening. So the way we kind of mitigated that was using the bio design process, where when we had a clear need statement, and that was very well put in front of us. What is the need? Our research was strong, and that ensured that we always knew where we want to take it. It did change, like in SaaS, we started out with building only a purely mechanical device, but as we progressed over the years, we kind of added the electronic components, we added the battery, we added the compressor. That happened because of changes in the environment as well. 4 5 years back when we started out, India was not 100% electrified. People were having power cuts and shortages. So just the manual mode was the optimal solution which people wanted. But over the next 2 3 years, things changed. People said we have electricity, but like electricity is there, but now we want for transport, and transport is longer durations and things like that. So things evolved. We had to do changes. Yeah, but that's just part and parcel of the entire journey.
Got it. So one other interesting thing that I find is like it took so long. So in this time, like currently we have a lot of hardware prototyping centers in India. Like that's sort of available right now. But I'm
Yes.
sure back when you're starting out, there were very few of them. So what challenges did you face in terms of hardware prototyping and sort of even manufacturing? Like were you able to easily find local partners or?
No, it did take time. We had to find manufacturers. We kind of found a good ecosystem in Bangalore, and we were lucky to be in Bangalore for that reasons. Uh, yes, but it did take a lot of time. And the other thing was most of the manufacturers were not ready to make products, you know, as good as required for the medical grade. So to comply to those standards was the big challenge. To make proof of concept prototypes, yes, you can make them quickly. You can show a prototype ready, you can demonstrate it, not on patients, but it works with on the technical front. But once you want to cross that bridge of saying it is a medical device, that is when the real hurdle comes. uh, yes, in the last 3 years there has been immense progress in that front, but when we started out, yes, we had to face a lot of challenges.
Yeah, thank you for that. So people, please send in your questions. We have Nachiket with us for another 10 15 minutes, and I know he'll be happy to answer any of your questions that you have. So you can put them in the chat box, and I'll ask them for you. Uh, does language play a role in UI UX? Is another question that we have.
Yes, language does play a role in UI UX. Unfortunately, in India, we still use English as the primary language for medical devices. Uh, it's just the regulation. We follow still the European regulation of CE and the US regulation of FDA. So that kind of mandates those languages, so English remains the language. But so say if you have to sell in European countries, a few of the countries have mandates to have all the UI UX, and even the labels and the catalogs and the brochures in the primary language. that is not the case in India. We don't require that kind of thing. But at the same time, we did create brochures in local languages to ensure that there was proper reach, and we were able to really create that awareness.
Another interesting sort of thing that I find is a lot of like India as a market is very common to a lot of the African markets and a lot of the South Asian markets when it comes to sort of electrification, and a lot of the problems that we face are quite similar. So, any plans to sort of test this out there, or maybe?
Yes, we are starting a small pilot in Africa very soon for the SaaS device. So that is just, I mean, happening in next few months.
Great. I think so. Okay, so there's another question. What would you say is needed to aid development of medical devices from a product design and prototyping point of view and a testing and validation point of
From a from a product design and development point of view, I would say what is critically not present right now in India is injection molding facilities of the precision which are required for medical design development. We had to go to China. We kind of did a lot with Indian manufacturers. The other thing that we really need to inculcate in the manufacturing is, the right first time attitude, putting a lot more emphasis on design, on CAD, and ensuring that what you get out of the machine is actually good in the first shot, and not the trial and test approach that most of Indian manufacturers do. Just make a drawing, put it in the CNC machine, and then something is not correct, the tolerances are not right, and then they go back. And this is what creates problems because you have not budgeted for time, and when you lose that time, that hurts a lot more.
view? Yeah. And from a testing and validation point of view?
Oh, yes. From a testing and validation standpoint, many more facilities have now come up. There are a lot of notified bodies who have set shops in India. So that way, you just need to find the right notified body for your testing and validation. And there are a lot of laboratories which are doing that. I guess a few of the devices which are, say, of class 3, or the invasive ones, those facilities are still not there. But for the class 2s and low ones, the facilities are pretty much there. But
Perfect.
there's like AMTZ, which is happening in Vishakhapatnam, which is like an entire zone for medical device development. So, which is a very good initiative of Government of India, and it has all the facilities to design and develop medical devices.
That's great to hear. I'm sure a lot of the students that are in the chat section will be happy to know that. So I think if there are no more questions, I would like to conclude the talk. Thank you so much, Nachiket, for giving us your precious time and a lot of valuable information in the presentation. And so finally, if you would like to leave your email address in the chat section for
Yes,
people to sort
definitely.
of connect to you.
And thank you so much for giving me this opportunity and to share my thoughts. And this is my email ID. You can always reach out to me on this email ID, and I will be
Got it.
happy to answer any of your questions.
Perfect. So again, thank you so much, and everybody, please feel free to sort of log on to adi.org.in and check out our subscriptions and membership opportunities, and also log on to Instagram and sort of follow us there. And I'm sure you can find Nachiket on Instagram too. And thank you so much again, Nachiket, for your time. And bye, everyone. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Bye, everyone.